Good morning, guys, or good afternoon, whether you're joining me from the present or the future. Welcome back to another FutureFight Vanguard video. Happy Wednesday, guys, and you guys know what time that is. It's time for another video. So today we're going to be covering the FutureFight video, another video from our V-BT03 Miyagi Academy set. We're going to be talking about Gold Paladin today. So Gold, lots of spam calling and kind of interesting little tech cards. With the addition of this set, they've actually gained I think it's Accel scissors, yeah. So unless it's Platina, one of the Accel cards, they've gained an Accel card that's really good for them. Allows them to create a lot more pressure than before, and actually allows them to put even more like early pressure on you by making sure that they go up in grade before you and do their Accel turbo as well. But we'll get into that when we get into the deck. Before we get started, as always, if you guys haven't already, be sure to subscribe so that you don't have to miss a single Cardfight Empire video going forward. And thank you guys for those of you who are already subscribed. Big shout out to the supporters, really appreciate you guys. Also, if you guys are interested in anime and manga and video games, be sure to check out my second channel, Let's Plays Animes, down in the description down below. And if you're interested in supporting this channel a little bit more, rather than just watching or whatever, you should check out our Patreon as well if that's something that interests you, down in this comment section down below. Also, I should mention our sponsor, Dabbers Cards and Games. Their logo is gonna appear above and be in the description down below. They are a local card shop located in Georgia that offers extensive Japanese deck boxes, sleeves, and all kinds of cool content, or not cool content, but all kinds of cool merchandise that you can get, like Pokeballs and all that stuff, video games, comics, whatever that you're interested in. They also offer video game tournaments and card game tournaments, and they also offer Cardfight Vanguard cards at competitive prices on the day that the set releases. So definitely check that out. If you live out of state, you can get in on the action too by going down to their website down in the description down below, which is dabberspro.tcgplayer.com, but I have it linked down there for you. So just go ahead and click that link and buy some cards if you think that the prices are good. But let's get right into it. So we're going to be talking about our Gold Paladin deck today. Let's see. Loading, yeah. Alright, V-BT03 Gold Paladin. Sweet. So, obviously no G-Zone, not a premium deck. I was actually wrong. It wasn't Accel Scissors or Platina. It was actually Raven-haired Accel. That's right, because this is actually a manga card. So, let's start off talking about the Gold Paladin deck. Like I said before, this deck is an Accel deck, so you do want to accelerate against your opponent and try to I think the Gold Paladin deck is the true Accel deck that is able to do that, because the speed of this deck is actually pretty insane. And even though you seem like you go down an advantage so much, like your advantage is regained purely through you just attacking and doing normal stuff, because all of your advantage goes down from you getting ahead of your opponent, and then it steadily goes back up until you realize that you have more advantage than your opponent. But you guys will see what I mean by that once we get into the deck. So let's get right into it. This is actually the wrong build, so we're going to reopen our Cardfight area. I don't know, I have like multiple builds of things, and then I don't save them correctly under the correct names. Probably because when I'm playtesting, I just playtest a bunch of random stuff. So sometimes I save it as like whatever name I feel like. And so then when I go to do the video, sometimes it's the wrong name. But let's try the standard deck test. Is this golds? This is not golds. Cool. Let's try this one more time. Third time's the charm, right? Come on. Literally that whole thing with Cardfight area not being able to like go backwards and check decks. So alright. So load. Would it be test deck 2? Nope, not that one. Load test deck. Aha. This seems like it might be the one, guys. Alright. Yes, this is the one. Cool. So let's get started with our grade 3s. So we run 9 grade 3s in the deck. Pretty typical for an Accel clan. Runs a good amount of grade 3s because you do want to have them because they generate, not only do the grade 3s in Gold Paladin generate advantage for you generally speaking, but they also, you also want to see them more, which is why we run 4 and 4 of both of our Accel cards, and we run 1 of our Garmor because it is a good ride when we don't have either or of our Accels. But let's get right into specifically our grade 3. So we run 4 Ravenhair Accel. This is the new card that I was describing. This is the VR from the set. It has 2 very, very good abilities. The first one is an activation skill from hand. So activation skills, remember, happen during your main phase. So during your main phase, you can activate an activation skill as long as you can pay the cost. So it has an activation skill from your hand that says if your Vanguard is Incandescent Lion Blonde Accel, then you counterboss 1 and you can ride this unit as stand. So this is really, really good because this you have a lot of ways to go up to Incandescent Lion Accel, and then basically you just go up to Accel and then you go instantly into Ravenhair, and then you just sit on Ravenhair for the rest of the game, and you kind of use your other cards just as beaters, and then you force pressure on them with Ravenhair's skill. So Ravenhair's secondary effect, which is the skill that I was referring to, is when it attacks, if you have an Incandescent Lion Blonde Accel in your soul, that you can counterboss 1, and until the end of this battle, this unit gets plus 15,000 power, a critical, and your opponent cannot call Sentinels from his or her hand. So this ability is incredible. Let me explain to you guys why. First of all, they put this in an Accel deck. Like, this is absolutely insane that they put it in an Accel deck. I think that's just very, very good. And counterboss 1 is not a heavy cost at all. It's actually very, very free, especially because we run stuff like Din Drain that counter charges and stuff like that. So it really can be free, absolutely free in some cases. And then also it gets plus 15k shield, which makes it 27 by itself, which means that even if it's a force deck where they have the advantage on you in terms of base number and defensive power, they will still have to drop more than 1 card, guaranteed to have to do more than 1 past you. In either an Accel or Protect or Force clan, if you drop a heal, which is the biggest amount of guard in this game that's outside of a PG, then you still have to drop another card to not be in danger, in my opinion, of being hit by this card. Also, it has that extra critical built into it, so it's a threat no matter what. As soon as you get to 3, 4, 5 damage, 5 damage pretty much steals the game because your opponent usually doesn't double heal. Even 4 damage usually steals the game because it's rare for your opponent to 6 damage heal, even though it seems like it isn't if you've been playing the game for a long time. But even 3, because I run front triggers in this deck, having them let this hit at 3 is really good, because if we hit front triggers, then they'll be able to pump the rest of our columns, and then suddenly they have to guard everything else with a front trigger on top of it. And we also run stuff like our Golden Beast Rampage Turtle that forces more cards out of their hand. So really, really, really good card overall. Very, very solid, damn near broken, and I think that you should be running this card at 4 no matter what. Next card is, if you guys watched my old Gold Paladin FutureFight video from the Ultra Rare Miracle Collection set, you already know fully well what this card does, but for those of you who don't, let's go into it. So Incandescent Lion Blonde Accel, this is the card that you have to have in your soul for Ravenhair Accel. So the regular Accel has a axe skill from hand that says if you have a Knight of Superior Skills Bowmains and a Knight of Elegant Skills Gareth on your Vanguard or Rearguard circle, you can Soul Blast 1 Crimson Lion Criff, which is our starter, so it'll always be in the soul. And then you can ride this card as stand, and if your opponent's Vanguard is grade 2 or less, then this unit gets -1 drive. So very, very good, because even when you get grade locked, you can actually keep tempo with your opponent and ride up to grade 3 when they ride up to grade 3, using your grade 2 abilities and your grade 3s mixed to ride up really fast. Ideally, you want to go first in this deck, and you want to ride up to 3 while your opponent is on grade 1, because that is completely possible, and that is completely preferred, that you reach Raven-haired Accel by the time you, like when your opponent's just on grade 1. So then you have 2 Accel circles, and you're ready to go with your Ravenhair Accel, and your opponent gets a grade 2, you start beating them up, blah, blah, blah. So this deck exerts a ton of pressure on your opponent, and really make sure that by the time they get to like the mid-late game, they're already in a really bad spot with you, and then the mid-late game they have to deal with Ravenhair as well, which is not really ideal to deal with when you have a bunch of other threats coming at you as well. But the secondary ability of Incandescent Lion Blonde Accel is when it attacks, you may call a card from hand to rearguard. So the reason why that's important, you might say, but I could just play the card from my hand to rearguard. Well, a lot of the cards in this deck have abilities that say when they're played by an ability, it does something. So, for example, Wonder Accel, when it's played, you can play another card. You know, Gareth, when it's played, you can counterblast 1 for plus 10,000. Dindrain, when it's played, you can use its ability to Soul Blast and then countercharge or draw a card and it gets plus 3k. So you really want to call cards off of abilities if it has an ability that pops from being called by an ability. So be aware of that as well. Then we're running one great Silver Wolf Garmor. I'm loving what they did with the art. It looks very similar to the old art, which was one of my favorite arts in the game, actually. So it has 2 abilities. We pretty much only ride this card when we can't find either Accel and we have this card in our hand. So Vanguard skill, if you have 1 or less cards in your hand, then all of your rearguards cannot be attacked nor retired by your opponent's cards or abilities. So very, very good, because sometimes, let's say that you're guarding and then your opponent starts going after your rearguards or something like that. If you guard, let's say that you keep a low hand amount, like you keep three or 4 cards in hand. If you guard with 3 cards, then that means that your opponent can't touch your rearguards anymore, and they can only touch your Vanguard. You may argue that this is a good or bad skill, because it's like, why would your opponent attack your rearguard if you have 1 or less cards in your hand? They should just destroy you by attacking Vanguard. But, you know, it's kind of one of those skills that's just useful when it is useful. The secondary Vanguard ability, which is the real skill that we actually like of this card, says when it's placed, counterblast 1, look at top 3 cards from your deck, call a card to rearguard circle, put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order, and 6 of your units get plus 3,000 power. So against Force, this is absolutely invaluable as a first ride if you do have to ride it, because not only is Garmor getting 3k, whatever else you have on the field gets 3k, and then whatever you call gets 3k, which can most likely hit Force or go towards making a better number to hit Force. So really, really good. Moving into our grade 2s, we have 4 Flame Wind Lion Wonder Accel. So it's another old card that got reprinted into V-Series with a different effect. So it has an activation ability, which is on the Vanguard circle. It says when it's on the Vanguard circle, you can Soul Blast 1 and retire a Crimson Lion Beast Howell, which is another one of the new cards, this grade 1 right here. So I'll talk about kind of the play style that you want to play, and how to play depending on what your hand is, stuff like that as well. But you can, for paying that cost that we talked about, you can search your deck for an Incandescent Lion Blonde Accel, write it as stand, and it gets -1 draw check until the end of the turn, and you shuffle your deck. And then the rearguard ability is when it's placed, you may call a card from your hand to rearguard circle. So if you're on regular Accel and you call Wonder Accel using regular Accel, when you attack with it, then you can call another card, which lets you reset your board, because you can attack on an Accel circle, attack on an Accel circle, attack with Vanguard, call Wonder Accel, use Wonder Accel skill, call another card. So you can do that if you like. I find that it kind of like wastes hand to call over cards, so I don't like calling over cards that I already have, because I want my opponent to try to take some time to try to destroy them if it is threatening to them, which most of the time it is. I also don't want to call over my turtles, because those are very invaluable. So, but the skill is there if you need it. If you notice that they have, like, you know, a few cards in hand, they're at 5 damage, you can finish them off by doing it. Hey, all power to you, just do it, as Shia LaBeouf would say. Shia LaBeouf. But let's move on to the next grade 2. It is 4 Knight with Superior Skills Bowmains. Bowmains has a Vanguard rearguard ability that says when placed from hand, you can discard a card and search your deck for up to 1 Knight of Elegant Skills Gareth, call it to rearguard circle, and then shuffle your deck. So what this card allows you to do is basically set up for if you already have an Incandescent Lion Blonde Accel in your hand. Because once you have Bowmains, you ride it, then you instantly have the means to Superior Ride Blonde Accel by Soul Blasting your starter. So it really sets you up really well for that. You can also do it when it's on the rearguard circle as well. Sometimes that applies, sometimes it doesn't. It usually applies because people run Vivian in the deck, but we actually don't run Vivian in this deck because I wanted to make room for Turtle, and also Counterblast and Soul Blast are they're used in this deck, so to speak, So we didn't want to run a card that ran a counter boss and a soul blast when it isn't giving us that much advantage as I think it should be for that cost in this deck. But it's the rearguard ability of Bowmains is when placed by your card's ability, this card gets plus 3,000 power. So it becomes a 12k base when placed by your card's ability during the turn. Moving on to our Golden Beast Rampage Turtle, the card I've been mentioning so much. This card is one of the best cards in the deck in my entire opinion. A lot of people don't run this card, and I think that that is a mistake, because any card in Accel that makes your opponent guard for 2 cards or more, and it's free essentially, because having more rearguards than your opponent in an Accel deck, that's like kind of free as a cost in my opinion. It doesn't get power like Musashi does, and it's not a grade 3 like Musashi and Murakumo. But when you do check front triggers or you put it on an Accel circle, it does get really hard for your opponent to guard. And this is also one of those cards where you want it to be like barely higher than your opponent's Vanguard in base power if they don't have any intercepts, because then you attack them for a really low base power and they have to give you 2 cards from their hand for a really low attack. So very, very good card. But the skill is when it's on the rearguard circle, during the battle that attack, if you have more rearguards than your opponent, while your opponent calls guardians from his or her hand, he or she must call 2 or more at the same time. So even with PGs, they would have to drop 3 cards to PG this card, because you have to drop 1 PG, another card on the guard circle, because you have to call 2 guardians at the same time, and then you have to drop a card for the PG. So very, very useful. Keep that in mind. Moving on to our grade 1s, we have 4 Crimson Lion Beast Howell, another one of our new cards. Synergizes really, really well, obviously, with Flame, Wind, Lion, Wonder Ezreal, but also has its own ability, which is on the rearguard circle at the end of the battle that it boosted. If you have a Vanguard with Ezreal in its name, you can counterboss 1 and put this unit into your soul, you draw a card, and you can call a card to rearguard circle. So a lot of times if I have an open Accel circle and I don't have anything really that's good to play for my hand, but I have a Howl, I'll boost my Vanguard with it, and since I'll be boosting Ravenhair usually, it'll be 35k with a crit, no sentinels, which means that they have to give me 2 cards to either 1 to pass me or 2 to pass me. And then after that, I draw a card. So you get to go post drive check and then draw an additional card off of this. And then you get to choose one of those 3 cards that you just drew. Hopefully one is a good attacker. And then you can just slam it down onto the Accel circle. So really, really good card. Solid, definitely. Not OP or anything, but definitely a solid addition to the deck. Then we have 4 Knight of Elegant Skills Gareth. Another one of our cards that helps us with the consistency of riding up really fast in this deck. Because of its synergy with Bowmains and actual Ezreal itself. So you do want to keep this in here. We do barely use the skill, but the skill is there for when we can use it, when we can spare the counterboss. So on the rearguard circle, when it's placed by your card's ability, you can counterboss 1 and this unit gets plus 10,000 power. So on the Accel circle it becomes 28, and on a regular circle it becomes 18. So you can have an 18k booster or an attacker. Usually I just play cards in the front row, so it'll be an 18k attacker. Really, really good all around, and a very well-rounded card. Moving on to our next grade 1, we have 3 Evil Slaying Swordsman Haugen. Haugen's really good in the early game, just kind of setting up your board, looking at the top card of your deck. If it's like a draw trigger or something, you can just leave it there for the next turn, take a damage, know that you're going to hit a draw, etc. Because it does allow you to choose if you're going to place a card to the board or not using its ability. So, and it's Vanguard rearguard skill, which means if you go second and you ride this card, then you can actually get a +1 because you can call a card. If your opponent lets your attack hit, you can actually just call a card and not retire anything because it retires into Haugen on your rearguard circle. So if it's on your Vanguard circle, it won't affect anything unless the card that you call is Haugen, and then you would have to retire that Haugen, which is really crappy. It happened to me one game, and I didn't realize that that could happen until that one game. So that's the only downside to it, but otherwise than that, I really, really like this card in the deck. Very solid 8k base, good to ride. And then its ability is Vanguard rearguard circle. When your Vanguard's attack hits, you can look at the top card of your deck, and you may call a card with a grade less than or equal to your Vanguard to another rearguard circle, and if you called one, then you retire an Evil Slaying Swordsman Haugen. So I usually like in the late game, place Haugen on the Accel circle, and then you can swing with Haugen first and then swing with your Vanguard. If your Vanguard does hit, you can look at the top card of your deck. If it's a good attacker, you can just call it over Haugen, since Haugen would be destroyed anyways by its own ability, and that way you're not minusing or anything. You're just breaking even. You're getting an extra attack on your opponent as well. Moving on to our last grade 1 of the deck, we have 2 Listener True Dendrain. I know we ran a lot more in the last variant of this build, but we cannot afford to run any more than this, in my opinion, just because the other cards are so solid and so good and so useful. So we do want to run 2 though, because we do want to have a little counter charge engine if we need it, and it also helps us draw cards to keep up the pressure when we're losing cards, quote unquote, by going plus on our opponent in advantage. So Listener True Dendrain has a rearguard ability. When placed due to your card's ability, Soul Blast 1, and you can draw a card or countercharge 1, so you pick one or the other, and then regardless, this unit gets plus 3,000 power, so it becomes a 10k base, able to hit your opponent's force grade 2s, or anything else that is grade 2 or lower, and then in some cases, can hit your opponent's Vanguard with a small boost from something else. So, very, very good card, very solid as attacker as well, and is our counter charge engine and also a part of our draw engine. Moving on to our grade 0s, we have a pretty interesting grade 0 lineup, and I will explain why. So we have Crimson Lion Criff as our starter. That's not hard to figure out at all. Basically, it just synergizes great with Accel, and we actually do need this exact starter to synergize with Accel since it has Crimson Lion Criff in the card text. We need to Soul Blast that card, and otherwise than that, it's just the V-Series draw card starter. And then for our triggers, we actually have 8 front triggers, 4 draw triggers, 4 heal triggers. So, before you call me out and say, this is terrible, why would you do this? So first of all, I mentioned every Accel video that I ever do, why would you not play a trigger, a special trigger that only you can have? If you have an advantage over other clans by having that trigger, why would you not play that trigger to protect you, protect your rear guards, and protect you from force? But a lot of people think that this deck synergizes better with crits because of how Ravenhair Accel works, and because you can crit sack your opponent. But a lot of the time, your opponent's got a 2 to pass you anyways, and that is always better with front triggers. Because if you check a front trigger first, like let's say that you're gonna check 2 triggers. If you check a front trigger, not only does your front row get power, so that you don't have to decide where the power goes, you don't have to decide if you're like, am I gonna risk this 2 pass, or am I going to, you know, just split to my rear guard and forget about Vanguard hitting? Like, now, why not both? So you're pumping your rear guard, and you're also pumping your Vanguard so that if you check a second trigger, your opponent has to eat that 2 crit, and then also they have to eat all your front row, your front trigger boosted rear guards. So not to mention, like, you know, Rampage Turtle or anything like that. So a lot of times in the early game, when you pull off the combo of riding up to grade 3, like way before your opponent will not be able to guard all the pressure that's coming at them. So most likely by the time that you get to your second Ravenhair Accel turn, or they're on grade 3 or something with a decent defense, a lot of times your opponent's going to be at 3, 4, or 5 damage, if not 4 or 5. It's like kind of rare that they're at 3. They had to like play their cards really well and hit triggers on defensive, but it's really rare that they're at 3 unless you didn't get any good attackers in your hand or something unfortunate just happens to you along the way of playing the game. But a lot of times your opponent will be at 3 or 4, meaning that they have to guard this, and then once they guard that, if you hit a front trigger, then they have to deal with a bunch of other rear guards that are powered up by a front trigger, and then they just wasted guard by guarding Ravenhair Accel, so they probably won't have enough guard to guard everything else as well. So you do want to be aware of that as well. So then we have 4 draw triggers. Our Sentinel trigger, pretty self-explanatory. We run 4 PGs in the deck because they're also draw triggers now, and then we run 4 heal as well. So 8 front triggers, 4 draw triggers, 4 heal triggers. So getting right into the games here, we're reopening our Cardfight area. As soon as it will decide, open sesame. There it is. All right. And open sesame. There it is. All right, so we're gonna go for game 1. Gold Paladin 1. All right, so game 1 we're playing against Dark Irregulars. Does seem to be an old version of Dark Irregulars, an old variant. When we first start off, we're only seeing old cards so far, so we actually no pass his Vanguard when he attacks a grade 2, because we can do that. We use the skill of our grade 2 to superior ride Accel. We attack with Accel using bow main skill to call it out, just so that it gets plus 3,000. And then we attack for 32 because we hit a front trigger. So our opponent rides Demon Eater, attacks with the rear guard first, which we guard, and then attacks with Demon Eater using the skill to counterboss 1 and shove it to soul, draw a card. It gets plus 10,000, so we're easily no guarding that. Our opponent hits a draw trigger and passes the turn. Another thing to mention is that against Accel, when you check front triggers, that is extremely good against Protect, because a lot of times their hand is just stocked with a bunch of PGs, and PGs is not going to help them with a bunch of big attacks, because PGs are really good for guarding singular column based big attacks, but if you have a bunch of attacks coming at you that are like decently powered, like they only have one turn of using all their PGs, and then you basically drain their whole hand. So really good. So our opponent attacks our Vanguard, we guard, and then we attack, or sorry, we no guard their Vanguard, and then we take Demon Eater as well. Unfortunately, we damage check a turtle, but then we also get one. So we attack with Ravenhair, and then we actually hit a front trigger. Our opponent just doesn't guard, as you guys can see, because that's why I said that this skill is so good, because you can see in our opponent's hand, he has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Sentinels in his hand, and then the other cards are 3 grade 3s, and 3 grade 2s. So even if he wanted to, he couldn't have guarded this attack. He just has to eat the attack with the crit, and then if he did guard it, we checked a front trigger. So not only does the power go up, but if he heals, like, we're able to attack him with our rear guards as well. So really good. Like I said, front triggers are completely OD, and I think that you're completely wrong if you think that front triggers are not really strong, especially in standard. In premium, it's more okay to not use front triggers, but especially in standard, as basic as the game is and the way that the game is set up right now in standard, I think that front triggers are just like super invaluable to run in Accel decks, unless that Accel deck doesn't specifically focus on front row or something like Tachikaze. But even that, you can still run front triggers in and be okay. But then we're loading up game 2 of Gold Paladin. We're actually playing against Deleters, the new deletion deck. Like I said in the last video, this is after set 4 is uploaded, so we're actually playing against set 4 stuff. So you guys actually get to see some games against set 4 stuff. That's really good for you guys, because you get to see how the deck ages into the future, so to speak. So our opponent checks the heal trigger, so we actually use Haugen, and then we decide to call the Rampage turtle to the rear guard circle, just so that our opponent couldn't snipe it. Our opponent attacks us, hits a draw trigger, we take a damage, and our opponent draws. We go ahead and ride Garmor because we don't have Incandescent Lion as well in our hand, which we have Ravenhair, but Ravenhair is kind of useless to ride when we don't have a Incandescent Lion in the soul. So we used the skill of Garmor to call Wonder Accel to call Dendrain, and then we hit a front trigger. So we do get 10k to our front row. We attack for 20, then 21. Our opponent has to guard with 2 cards, and then attack for 32. Our opponent guards again. So as you guys can see, we're already draining his hand. He has to play cards from his hand to make an offensive assault against me. And so he has 3 damage and 6 cards in hand, which is honestly nothing in the face of an Accel deck. So we ride Ravenhair just to get that additional Accel circle. We play a Howl behind our Rampage turtle, and so we attack Vanguard because if we hit a trigger, that basically would have been very good, and we could take advantage of that against our opponent. But we use Dendrain skill to call a card, and then we attack for 20 and 18. He no guards the 18 because he would have had to drop 2 or more cards, which is completely understandable. So he actually binds one of my cards. He goes into the deleter card that has 2 crit. I PG it, and then he checks a draw trigger, putting the power of his Vanguard up. So I guard his rear guard, and then he uses given skill, which I always believe that when the deleter player uses his skill, that's what seals the game for them. But he was basically banking on the fact that out of 1 dry check, he would hit a crit. If not, he just does 2 damage to me and I live. So I ride Accel, I call a board, and then I attack for 12 to his Vanguard. We actually check a front trigger. He doesn't hit any, so he does heal, which is unfortunate for me. But then we attack him again, and he double 6 damage heals. So I'm like, wow, he's able to PG my last attack. re-ride, and then I just can't guard without, because he deletes me, I was actually 5k off from guarding if he were to check no triggers, which he did check no triggers, so we were actually just 5k off from surviving. But basically the only reason that our opponent survived and lived was obviously because he double 6 damage healed. Any other way, he would have died. But like I said, your opponent regularly doesn't double 6 damage heal. Also during that game, consider that we didn't get the combo off of riding against our opponent really fast, doing the accelerated ride. And loading up game 3 here. Gold Paladin 3. We're playing against Murakumo for game 3. It looks to be new Murakumo with Shiryuki added. So we actually attack with Haugen. We check our top card of the deck, and it's actually Haugen. So we just call it just to thin our deck, and we retire. But we could have got a free card, and it was Haugen. So unfortunately for us. But we do have the combo in our hand to be able to superior ride. So this is cool. So we do use Bowmain skill to call Gareth to the front row rearguard circle. We use the skill to ride superior ride Accel, and then we superior road Ravenhair. So we check a draw trigger, giving it to our rear guard, and then we attack for 18. So as you guys can see, like, we pretty much have equal hand to our opponent, but we're also really ahead of him in the Accel game. So, and not only that, but our Vanguard is going to remain a threat to just sit on and poke our opponent for the rest of the game. So our opponent attacks our rear guard. We don't really care about it. We let it go, and then we let him deal 1 damage to us just so that we can do Ravenhair skill. We don't really have any good rear guards to play, but we just use Ravenhair skill, and he actually one-to-passes it, which is really stupid in my opinion, because we checked 1 trigger and we just bypassed the attack and he took 2 damage. Like, if I ran crit and I checked crit there, he literally would have died. So I don't know why he one-to-passed it. That seemed like really dumb to me. But he did ride Mandala Lord on his next turn, copying 2 cards from his board. And then he calls 2 more cards, so he's kind of overextending in my opinion here, because he should keep the cards in his hand to block Ravenhair. But I actually 2-to-pass him, and that's kind of like the correct way to do it if you want to drop 1 card from your hand. I just dropped 1 card from my hand just to like guard him. And then he attacks with his rear guard, attacks with his other rear guard. I hit a front trigger, and then I don't have to re-ride at all. I'm literally just going in. But I attack for 35. With 2 crit. He uses Shiryuki skill to make everything go down by 10, and then he one-to-passes me again. Unfortunately, I don't get it that time. I use Howl skill to counter boss 1, call a card to the board, and I call Dendron to countercharge. I attack his Interceptor so that he loses 5k more shield. We attack for 12, and then we attack his Vanguard, which he has to PG because he had 3 PGs in his hand. So he rides Mandala Lord again using the skill, and then he uses the skill to pay cost, and then he realizes that he doesn't have any more targets in his deck, which is something that as a Murakumo player he should have been paying a lot more attention to, he or she. But, you know, there's a lot of new players in Standard, so I don't really hold it against him. But yeah, so then he attacks for 12. I 2-to-pass that again. Kind of being a little cocky on my part because he could have checked double triggers there, one of them being a crit and just ended the game. But we do check a front trigger on our rear guard. And he's like, God, I hate like Ravenhair, pretty much because I can just sit on it the entire time and just kind of, you know, pump him. But he was like, you know, just attack me and end it. And I was like, you know, my last opponent double 6 damage healed, so I really don't want to risk that. I just want to, you know, and then he healed, so he's 6 damage heals, and then his second damage is not a heal. So I was like, wow, almost. And that ended up being game 3. So 2 out of our 3 opponents 6 damage healed on us, and one of the games we were still able to pull out a win, and the other game we still would have pulled out a win if our opponent didn't double 6 damage heal. So this deck's really, really good. I would give it a 9 out of 10 overall. Very, very good deck to play in Standard if you're looking to play a competitive deck for Standard, as much as I believe that Standard is not actually that competitive. Because it is just, you know, a bunch of numbers, and I guess you could say, I'm not going to get into that, that's a conversation for a different day, but basically if you enjoy Standard, but I don't really enjoy Standard all that much because I believe that it's not as fun or has as much card interaction as Premium. But with that being said, this has been the video. Again, you know, check out all the links in the description down below if you guys are interested in that. But until the next video, I'll see you guys. It's been Josh, and I'll see you guys on the Friday. On Friday. Peace, guys.